147, a lot of talent. Who's Terrence Crawford want? I want the other champion.
Welcome to the motherfucking ring, ladies. We're covering today's top boxing news.
And I just want to say something. A lot of people like want to talk about when I say, oh, we on different side of the streets and things like that. It's true. Like me and Terrence Crawford on different side of the streets. He's just signed with ESPN. I don't fight for ESPN. I fight for Showtime or Fox. Talk to him. You know what I'm saying? So he's on different side of the street.
You know, the events that took place this weekend throughout several weight classes involving several fighters, they're going to resonate long after this weekend is over. You understand? There's a lot of things that happened, and it gave us, the fans, a lot to discuss. And this is one of those things. Errol Spence's comments post-fight in reference to Terrence Crawford and Bob Arum, that, you know, he's talking about the networks, that he fights for Fox, and he fights for Showtime, and Terrence Crawford fights for ESPN. Okay. And when I heard this, I struggled to interpret
what it meant. What
exactly he's trying to communicate. Like, what are you saying? Because it sounds, and correct me, matter of fact, you can feel free to disagree.
Oh, fuck.
But it sounds like he's saying that, the fight is more trouble than it's worth?
What?
That we shouldn't expect you to fight Terrence Crawford? I'm not understanding. I thought it was strap season, and Terrence Crawford's got a strap, and I vaguely recall you telling him to get one before he goes barking up your tree. Well, he's got one now. I don't have any illusions about this fight. This isn't a fight that I'm expecting to happen tomorrow. We're all aware as fans...
Takes time.
...that there's gonna have to be some kind of bipartisanship. There's gonna have to be a willingness from both sides to make the fight. But when I hear Errol Spence saying these things, constantly repeating that...
Side of the street.
He's on the other side of the street and I'm on this side of the street, it's almost like he's trying to drive a wedge into the conversation. I hear frustration in Errol Spence when he says these things. I hear frustration. The same kind of frustration that I heard in Keith Thurman. The same kind of frustration I heard in Keith Thurman's voice whenever reporters and members of the media would ask him about Errol Spence. And now, with Errol Spence, I hear that same frustration. Except it's because the media and people in the media are hounding him with the name of Terrence Crawford. That's what I hear. Because the bottom line is, when both guys want the fight gets made. And it's that simple. When both guys want the fight gets made. So what I'm seeing here is that it sounds like Errol's drinking his own Kool-Aid. It sounds like he's believing his own hype. And I hate to think what this is turning into, but the evidence is there that this is turning into yet another one of those situations that's a real pain in the ass. That based on the demeanor of the fighter and the comments of the fighter, the fans are going to turn into parrots. They're going to start to repeat whatever the guy says due to their own fandom without thinking it through. That is Errol Spence really the A-side? Really? You're the A-side already?
Here we go.
All you gotta do is beat Carlos Ocampo, Leonard Bundu, Chris Algieri, and Kell Brook off of the beating of his life. Right off taking the beating of his life. And suddenly, you are the A-side, you are the more decorated fighter who has fought better people like Lamont Peterson at 147 pounds who did little more than fight Avanesian. Don't ask Errol Spence's fans who that is because they don't know. They don't know. They don't know who Avanesian fought to get that WBA baby belt that he was holding. They don't know nothing about that. All they know is that Errol Spence said something, and because he said it, they agree with it without thinking it through. And it's situations like this that make discussing boxing, at times, a pain in the ass. Because you're not talking to a boxing fan anymore. You are talking to a man fan. A fan of a man. And no matter what that man says, no matter if it's right, if it's wrong, if it makes sense, if it don't make sense, these guys are gonna co-sign
It's
it.
like a call.
Walk away from there, okay?
I can't begin to tell you how annoying this entire my network is better than your network situation. I can't begin to tell you how fucking annoying that is because these guys talk like they're on the fucking payroll. That's how they talk. What I see is that boxing is very much thriving. In the absence of a Floyd Mayweather, who was a marquee fighter of unprecedented marquee value. And as a fighter like Manny Pacquiao is in the twilight of his career and his career is coming to a close, while his peers like Miguel Cotto and Shane Mosley and Juan Manuel Marquez have called it a career, boxing still thrives. It still has stars. There are still several outlets and several different promotional companies affiliated with different networks that are still shelling out good cards, very good fights. Whether you're talking about Top Rank, the PBC, Matchroom Boxing, you name it. There's enough boxing for the fans to enjoy, but you got these kinds of guys that they really fall in love with fighters. So whatever the fighter says, whether it makes sense or it doesn't, they co-sign it. You've got to think about what Errol Spence said up here.
Who has he fought? I fought Lamar Peterson, Chris Algieri, Kell Brook. I mean, and how many fights he got? 30-some fights? You know what I'm saying? Like I said, he's a great fighter, things like that, but you can't put him to me. A lot of stuff is smoke and mirrors. That's what Bob Errol do. Bob Errol do a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors with him, and that's how it is with Terrence Crawford. Name me a top guy he fought that's better than Chris Algieri. Felix Diaz. So you think I think Chris Algieri beat Felix Diaz. Adongo just got knocked out by Reese Gregarious. Jeff Horn.
Now, as you can imagine, Terence Crawford didn't take kindly to these comments, and he's not taking them lying down. He took to Twitter, and he had this to say. He said, LOL at Errol Spence. Yeah, you was drunk last night, boy. You no way, shape, or form the A-side, dummy. You talking about who I beat. Everyone you beat, I smashed, boy. How many titles in different weight classes have you won? I'll wait. Now, here's the annoying part of this conversation. Matters of fact are going to be ignored with reckless abandon. Matters of fact are going to be ignored by Errol Spence's fans, and when irrefutable facts are presented, these guys are just going to work hard to create arguments that suit their narrative. So what if he was undisputed? It was a weak division. Well, he's in Errol Spence's division right now, and Errol doesn't seem to be in any hurry to fight him. I mean, he just doesn't. Why continually talk? We already know that you're on different networks, and we already know that that does present some challenges, but the language that Errol Spence is using is sounding more and more like, well, you've got to come to me because I'm not coming to you. That doesn't sound like a guy that wants to fight. Not when you're saying shit like that you're on that side of the street and I'm on this side of the street. So cross the fucking street. Oh, I get it. You're telling him that he has to cross over to your side of the street instead of saying, hey, let's meet in the middle so I can punch you in the face. Let's meet in the middle because I want this fight. I don't hear that kind of language. That's not what I hear. But among the other things that Errol Spence said
while drunk
that really got my attention is he's actually questioning the quality of competition of Terence Crawford, who is the last American undisputed champion of how many fucking years? How many? I mean, if it's so fucking easy, go ahead, you do it. Because the guys at 147, they didn't want to fight you, so why didn't you just go to 154? Why didn't you do that? I mean, Lord knows that this is something that, people told Triple G for a long time. That if you're having so much trouble securing opponents in your division, why not just move up? I guess that doesn't apply to Spence, not when you ask his fans. The same fans who were the same guys that were saying what I just said. Whatever. But let's really put our thinking caps on here. You're telling me that you think Chris Algieri is a better fighter than Felix Diaz. Felix Diaz, who is a gold medalist. You're telling me that you think that beating Leonard Bundu is better than beating Yuriorkis Gamboa, who was undefeated and was a pound-for-pound darling at the time. Do you guys remember that? This is the beauty of boxing, that people have short memories. That after the guy loses the fight, suddenly he's just a piece of shit. It's the beauty of boxing. Hey, when was Kell Brook ever on a pound-for-pound list? We know that Yuriorkis Gamboa was on a pound-for-pound list, but when was Kell Brook ever on a pound-for-pound list?
Never!
Has that ever happened, or is my memory not serving me? Is Kell Brook a gold medalist? Hey, hold on. Let's ask a question. How many Olympic gold medalists has Errol Spence beat? How many undefeated champions has Errol Spence beaten? How many titles has he unified? How many? Has he ever held the Ring Magazine belt? Is he the lineal champion of the 147-pound division? I mean, we know that Terence Crawford was the lineal at 135 and 140 on top of being undisputed. How many of these accolades and achievements has Errol Spence garnered? Because the way they hyped this guy up, you'd have thought he did this shit 3 and 4 and 5 times. The way they hyped the guy up. I have no complaints about Errol Spence's resume as it stands. I say it all the time. His resume looks exactly how it's supposed to look like, given where he is in his career. But when we start questioning the resumes and achievements of other, more accomplished fighters, then it's time to cast that harsh light. For starters, the crown jewel of your resume is Kell Brook, and Kell Brook's resume at 147 was already thin. The only name that these guys can name off the top of their heads from Kell Brook's resume is Sean fucking Porter, and that fight took place 3 years before he even fought Spence. So what makes Kell Brook this amazing...
Magna fucking
Oh
Carta.
my God! Like, what makes him all of that? Or is it that you're just inflating whoever Errol Spence fights because you just want to rub his fucking back? This is what's going on, people. We are at that point where this is about to become the most annoying, or one of the most annoying subjects in boxing, where you already got guys at each other's throats over Wilder and Anthony Joshua. You have this bullshit to look forward to. Expect it.
I'm A-side. Terrence Crawford got to come across the street. He got to leave ESPN and come to Showtime and fight.
Hold on. What the fuck? What does that mean?
This guy's already talking about A-sides and B-sides. Already. And that's indicative of something. That is indicative of how Errol Spence views this. I mean, you're already talking about A-sides,
Really,
and
fam?
he's got to leave his network in order for a fight. Like, seriously?
Wow.
How could anyone hear this? How could anyone who wants to see this fight hear this and not get the impression that Errol Spence is building obstacles? That's what it sounds like. It doesn't sound like, hey, people say you're the best and people say I'm the best. Why not find out which one of us really is the best? What he's saying here don't sound like that. Don't sound like that at all. It really don't sound like it's strap season. It sounds like it's in-house fight season. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Errol Spence knows that a lot of people out there favor him to beat the likes of a Sean Porter or a Danny Garcia or a Keith Thurman, and he's very comfortable with that. But the one guy that's hunting him, the one guy who's really, well, you know, aside from Mikey Garcia, but we all know he's courting disaster. Back to the point. The one guy who may actually stand a legitimate chance of beating him in the welterweight division is the one guy that, oh, you're on that side of the street, so until you get off that side of the street, hey, I don't know how else I'm supposed to interpret these comments, because these comments don't sound conducive towards making the fight. This don't sound like progressive thinking where we're gonna do what we gotta do to make the fight. It don't sound like that. I got nothing against the PBC. They put on good cards the same way other, organizations put on good cards. I've got nothing against the PBC or Al Heyman. But you've got to understand that what I'm saying is related to the fans and how the fans react to these kinds of comments. You understand? They buy into it. When what I'm seeing here is these same fans, these same PBC fans, who are of the belief that Bob Arum only wants to make in-house fights. What do you think you're hearing, you fucking morons? What does it sound like? I have a question for you guys. Do you want to see Errol Spence fight Terence Crawford?
Yes and no.
Do you think it's likely that Terence Crawford is just going to leave the network that he's on to go fight Spence? Isn't there another way that these guys can meet in the middle to make the fight? Don't you want to see the fight?
Yes and no.
I mean, if you know what, if Terence Crawford is so fucking crappy and it's all smoke and mirrors like Spence says, if it's all just hype and it's all just hoopla and this guy's really not that good, if that's the case, then I guess you don't really want to see this fight then, right? Because after all, Terence Crawford really isn't that good. See, unlike you sycophant motherfuckers, I can admit that Errol Spence is one of the elites at 147 pounds, and he might just be the best guy there. He might be. I can say that wholeheartedly. Whereas if I ask you fucks about Terence Crawford, you're probably going to disparage his resume and everything that he's done.
Sucks.
Which begs the question, if this guy's such a fraud, then I guess you don't want to see him fight Errol Spence then, right? Because he's a fraud. It's all smoke and mirrors. The magic of Bob Arum. Bob Arum, who doesn't have any good fighters. He doesn't have a guy like Vasily Lomachenko.
No.
He doesn't have a guy who was an undisputed champion like Terence Crawford. No. He doesn't have hot young up-and-comers like Shakur Stevenson. He doesn't have guys like that.
No.
It's all just smoke and mirrors, right?
Step season.
I could tell that this is going to develop into being one of the more annoying conversations whenever one of these guys or both of these guys' names are brought up. Because I reiterate, a lot of, PBC, I got nothing against PBC. They put on a great card last night, okay? Got nothing against them. But their fans have this bizarre mindset where they think that it's, that you have to trash every other promotional company or every other promotional company's fighter or fighters because you're a fan of the PBC. Excuse me for being a boxing fan. Excuse me for being a fan of all things boxing. But these guys, they make it to where you can't be a fan of the sport. You gotta be a fan of this guy and this organization and this banner. It's this gangland mentality. It's like some little kid shit. I reiterate, it's like that.
My dad is better than you, Dad.
And the funniest fucking thing about all of this is when they asked Terrence Crawford about fighting Errol Spence, did at any time he say Errol Spence has to leave his network in order for that fight to happen?
No.
Did at any point he put up all these barriers and obstacles that, well, you gotta do this and that?
No.
Did at any point that happen?
Terrence
When they
Crawford
talked to
come on the street.
Terrence Crawford about Errol Spence, the talk was proactive. Whereas I keep seeing Errol Spence put up statutes and limitations, and you gotta get a title, and I gotta get 3 titles, and now you gotta leave ESPN. When it seems to me that this kind of talk sounds like you're just putting distance between him and yourself. And if you guys out there disagree, I could give a flying fuck, because you know what? You came here to listen to me, and that's how I feel about it. If you feel different, I didn't fucking ask you.